So, Ambassador, the first question I want to tell you is, what future do you see for Trump's plan to Middle East?
Let's agree that it's a good beginning, that he has succeeded in stopping the genocidal slaughter in Gaza. You know, the people of Gaza, they have lost over 250,000 people between killed, wounded, or disappeared. That makes somewhere between 12 and 15% of their society. So it was a tragedy of monumental amplitude. So stopping the genocidal slaughter was a good beginning, but it's only the beginning. Now, let me tell you, we as a Palestinian society, we were intrigued for decades on how come we are never getting our legitimate share of understanding, sympathy, solidarity, and support. And our explanation was that, unfortunately, we were the victims of European history. This is why we never got our share of legitimate sympathy. For decades, our victims were as though they were nameless, fatherless, motherless, childless, worthless. And I was all the time wondering, do we happen to be children of a lesser God? Now, luckily, things are changing. The political and popular landscape has dramatically changed, and much to the better. So I'm hopeful for the future. His Majesty the King in this morning mentioned Fukuyama, the end of history, and the end of history. Another theory that was fashionable in the 60s was about the acceleration of history because of the village planétaire, the global village, interdependence, technological revolution. I hope that we will witness again an acceleration of history, and I believe we know what should be the destination of our future pursuit through the diplomatic avenue, the two-state solution as explained by His Excellency, the Foreign Minister of Spain. So I'm hopeful for the future, but what we need is statesmanship, determination, and perseverance. Now, the question is Trump the person? Well, Trump today...
And his plan.
Pardon me?
And his plan.
And his plan.
Yeah.
As I told you, it's a good beginning, but we have to live through all the phases and beyond with an acceleration of history. I personally believe that American-Israeli relations have always been interesting, intriguing, fascinating. And there were two schools of thought in America. Those who thought that it was the dog wagging the tail, and those who thought that it was the tail wagging the dog. I'm sorry if the example is vulgar, but that was in American discourse. I personally believe that Trump today should become aware of the changing landscape in America. A late opinion poll shows that 60% of American public opinion today is in favor of an American recognition of Palestinian statehood. 60%, a comfortable majority. There is a comfortable majority within the voters and the supporters of the Democratic Party across generations. There is an expanding minority within the Republican Party that are unhappy to see that American foreign policy in the Middle East is a subcontract in the Israeli strategy, and they would like to say America first and America being great again by dictating policy on the protégé, who's an undisciplined protégé in the region, etc., which is happening these days, by the way, and I hope to see it more frequently. Another phenomenon that is very important is the changing mood within the American Jewish community. The American Jewish community was accustomed to be always at the forefront of human rights, civil rights, but for the last 50, 60 years, they were resigned to defending the indefensible, up to the extent that today they are extremely uncomfortable with the misbehavior of the Netanyahu government. And you still remember probably the demonstrations in Washington and New York, not in our name, and chapeau for them. I really bow in respect for those courageous individuals who must have been under tremendous family pressure, etc., etc. So that's another promising factor which has changed dramatically, and I hope that the White House is aware of those dramatic changes. Now, let me tell you, if I were a Jew, I would believe that a Palestinian state is the right of us, the Palestinians. But it's a moral duty and an ethical obligation for us Jews, because we, the Jews, know better than anybody else the price that the Palestinian people have had to pay individually and collectively for the creation and the birth of the Israeli state. And let me tell you, what we have witnessed recently proves something which is paradoxical. In Israel-Palestine, the oppressor hates the victim much more than the victim hates the oppressor. And we need to change that. And what we have lived through the last 70 years was a democratically supported oppression. A democratically supported oppression in the sense that every 4 years they had elections and political parties were competing with radical discourse, hoping to be rewarded by the voter. And we have witnessed the radicalization of Israeli society gradually. So we need the international community to remain vigilant, on standby. And I'm in favor of multilateralism. And all the signals recently were positive and constructive. I think the world wishes us happiness and success. You know, I wrote an article on the eve of the new millennium. And I said, I hope that peace in the Middle East, peace in the Holy Land, will be our gift to the world. But if we are incapable, I hope it will be the gift of the world to us. So today, on behalf of Palestine, even though I'm a retired diplomat, on behalf of Palestine and the Palestinians, I would like to say the following. We are ready to respect all our commitments to the international community. But today, it's the time for the international community to respect its commitments towards us. And the fact that we became unreasonably reasonable. By the way, we became unreasonably reasonable. We and the entire region, the Arab states. We no more challenge Israeli existence, we just challenge Israel's expansion. And what was the message of the Arab peace plan adopted in 2002 on an initiative from Saudi Arabia with Palestinian blessings? It was the following, in one sentence. If you, Israel, withdraw out of the 67 expansion, we are ready to recognize your pre-67 existence.
Ambassador, the next steps in Trump's plan to Middle East is to get Hamas disarmed and try to combine Israel to full withdrawal of his troops from Gaza. Do you think there are enough incentives to get that?
Well, I believe that the American administration and the envoys that Trump has chosen, their task today and tomorrow is how to contain and restrain the reluctant Netanyahu. Netanyahu would have liked to perpetuate the war, because for him it was perpetuating his political career. He's either prime minister or in jail. That's the choice he has, and he chose war. On the Palestinian level, I am a believer in public opinion. And I believe Palestinian public opinion, besides the factions of Palestinian society, will be pressuring Hamas not to be an impediment and an obstacle, one, for the pacification of the Gaza Strip, allowing for the Israeli total withdrawal out of Gaza, and to allow the reconstruction of Gaza, which, if ever Hamas remains stubborn, might not take place. So I rely, and I would like to bet, on the maturity and assertiveness of Palestinian public opinion. And I believe tomorrow, now that the guns have grown relatively totally silent, Hamas should expect a difficult internal intra-Palestinian discussion about their military strategy and their negotiating skills, if any. But that's an issue which I hope we have behind us. Now, for the future, let me tell you one thing. I personally believe we became unreasonably reasonable. Throughout the last 40 years, we have aligned ourselves on the international consensus. It's not the world that has aligned itself on our preference. No, it's the other way around. We aligned ourselves on the international consensus. We have abandoned the dialogue by arms, opted for the arms of dialogue. We are no more asking for absolute justice. We are asking only for possible justice. You couldn't be more unreasonably reasonable. But let me tell you frankly, clinically, any political diagnosis will tell you that what is democratically today acceptable to the Israelis is not acceptable to us Palestinians. And what is acceptable to us Palestinians is not acceptable to the Israelis. The flow of the previous peace process starting in Madrid and in Oslo, was that too much was left to the local belligerent parties to sort it out. And since we are speaking of a very asymmetrical relation, the Israelis were tempted that they could be in a position to dictate the ceiling of the possible, the ceiling of the permissible, and the pace of progress, if any. No, my friend. I believe peace is too important to be left to the Israelis to decide upon. They grew accustomed that if they vote to this party, they withdraw out of 85%, but if I vote to that other party, we will withdraw out of 40%. It's not up to them to decide how much withdrawal. I think there is a principle, a founding principle in the UN Charter about the inadmissibility of territorial acquisition by force. So let me tell you, as an individual, but also as a political scientist, I'm a big fan of General de Gaulle. De Gaulle is a statesman like they make them no more, apparently. But de Gaulle in '67, after the '67 war, launched an initiative of his own, which was called La Concertation à Quatre, the coordination of the major four powers. Popular China was not yet in the Security Council. And his idea was that those four major powers meet, decide on what is achievable, acceptable, possible, doable, desirable, and signal unequivocally to the local belligerent parties what the world expects from them. Unfortunately, his initiative never flied too high, and besides 3-4 meetings in New York by the ambassadors in New York at the UN, that was it. Why? Because the Americans were not unhappy then with the military victory of Israel. It compensated the humiliations of Vietnam. The Soviet Union, short-sighted like they frequently could be, preferred the bipolar constellation and didn't see why they should give equal status to lesser countries like Britain and France. The English were unenthusiastic simply because the initiative was French to begin with. You know the allergies between the two. And since then, we had a durable process instead of lasting peace. You and I probably are in favor of a lasting peace, not a durable process. And what we need today is pressure. To tell you very frankly, I would welcome an international pressure on both sides according to international law. And you probably remember, almost less than 2 years ago, the General Assembly of the UN asked from the International Court of Justice an advisory opinion, which was issued beautifully written, impeccable, immaculate, which says the occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza is illegal, not legitimate, and Israel should be withdrawing. We are in favor of permanent peace. We are ready to sign it tomorrow.
1 minute, Ambassador, for the last question. Do you think that a Palestinian state can be real, considering how Israel has developed the occupation, especially in West Bank? You know, it's hard to make a territorial continuity there.
Let's first agree that everybody considers those settlements as illegal, and Rabin is known to have said, I wouldn't to have said in the early 90s, I wouldn't like to have the settlers as my immediate neighbors, so I don't know why I should be having them as my immediate neighbors. But let me tell you, sir, I personally believe a territory that was occupied in 6 days in 1967 can be evacuated also in 6 days if there is a political willingness, so that the Israelis can rest on the 7th and we can engage in the fascinating journey of state building and economic recovery. And let me tell you, I happen to be a proud sociological Christian. I believe even in the bleakest of moments, a Palestinian state will be resurrecting. And as you know, we in Jerusalem, we in Palestine, we have had some previous experience in resurrection.
We have time for more questions. What do you think about the role of European Union about these last 3 years?
Let me tell you, we are Europhiles in the Middle East. By the way, I'm married to a Belgian. My wife is Belgian. My daughters are Euro-Arabs. And we in the Middle East, we were not resigned to the Kissinger verdict that Europe shouldn't have a role because it raises Arab expectations. That's a quotation from Kissinger, Machiavellic Kissinger in the 70s. I personally believe that it's Israel and American objection that relegated Europe up to now to a role of a payer rather than a player. And I always used to tell my European interlocutors, Europe is still in search for a role. And we in the Middle East, we have a role in search for an actor. If we can merge the actor in search for a role and the role in search for an actor, we will be all less unhappy. So we welcome a decisive European role as a geostrategic partner for the region. And let me tell you, there is no more a regional conflict today in our world. And if there is a regional conflict which is not regional because of its capability of overspilling militarily, economically, and demographically, it's in the Middle East. So you will be one defending universal principles, human dignity, as the minister has said, but you will be also defending your national interest by interfering constructively in establishing peace. You're most welcome.
So, shukran, Ambassador. Gracias.
Thank you, sir.